Hi everybody, welcome back to Winging It. If you're joining in for the first time, you're very welcome. I'm so glad that you found us. My name's Rebecca. I run Feather Stitch House with my husband and I am the voice and the hands in the tutorial you're about to watch. So we're in week 11 and we're in the second week in March, and our second week prompt is always a word prompt, and if you've been following me over on Instagram you will already have seen that the word we're using this week is nesting. So we're thinking about all those birds that are coming back into our gardens now that it's spring, making their nests and getting ready to lay their eggs. We're going to be working with a bit of applique this week, so if you have Bondaweb, that will come in very handy. If not, don't worry, there's lots of different ways to do applique, and then we're going to be embroidering over the top at the end. I'm also going to introduce a new resource this week that I've been finding really helpful in my embroidery, so keep an eye out for that. So let's grab our bits of fabric, our threads, our needle and our scissors, and let's get stitching. Okay, so I started plotting out some ideas for this week's prompt, and I had two ideas that I was really happy with, and I spent quite a long time trying to decide which one to go with. So my first idea was some branches that we could applique on, and we could add in some buds using our detached chain stitches, and then I thought we could use some detached fly stitches just overlaid on top of each other to create a nest and maybe applique in some eggs in the nest. And I really like this idea. I may come back to it. I might just have to make an embroidery of this anyway because I just want to give it a go. But I wanted to also not have everything purely embroidery, so I thought we could go with a bit of applique this week, and what I have decided to go with is some nesting boxes with some lettering over the top, and again you could do either of these or one of your own, but this is the one I'm going to work with. So we're going to bust out our Bondaweb again and have a play with some applique and overstitching. So this is where we're heading for this week's prompt. So I'm going to be working on this lovely custard yellow this week. I've got all sorts here. I've just got out all my yellow fabrics ready for this month. So what I've selected are some Japanese yarn dyed fabrics, and I love these because most of the time they are the same back and front, so it's woven into the pattern. This one's a bit different because it's got a pattern in the weave, so the back looks a bit different, and I've got this sort of custard yellow one here, and you can see I've already attached my Bondaweb. Now if you're not sure about how to use Bondaweb, I talk about the process in our video on applique, and I'll put a card in the top so that you can visit that video if you need a refresher. So I've already put some Bondaweb on the back, and I wanted 4 different colours, so I've also got this quilting cotton, and I've already got my Bondaweb on the back there. So I've already attached my Bondaweb to the back of these. I'm going to just clear these out of the way, and I've also gathered some yellow threads. I've got some wool here as well, just because I thought that might help. And I'm going to introduce us to a new product as well today. We don't sell it, but you can get it from Amazon, and that is Stick and Stitch. So this is a water soluble stabiliser that you can put in your printer. Just got an offcut here, but you can also trace through it, so I hope you can make out that line. I can see it much better in real life, but you can trace onto this, stick it on, sew over the top, so you've got really crisp lines to sew over, and then you rinse it under warm water and it dissolves away and disappears. So I'm going to show you how to use that a bit later. So let's start by cutting out our shapes, and I'm not going to use my best embroidery scissors because this is paper, and I hope you can see, if I hold it that way, you can see the Bondaweb, that I've cut more Bondaweb than just my shape, and I've done that because that way I get a really crisp line and the Bondaweb is exactly where I need it. So I'm just going to cut out my shapes. Now this one I'm going to use to make stands for the birdhouses, so it's a sort of brownish yellow. Right, so I'm going to bring in my ironing mat and get my piece of greaseproof paper, and I'm just going to press over the top. Okay, so I've just put my border back in there because it erased when I ironed it, and I'm just going to trim off these bits of Bondaweb at the bottom. Now they are stuck down, so I'm just going to have to ease my scissors just underneath. Okay, so I've got my little birdhouses, and I'm going to overstitch over the top of these in just some nice yellowy threads. And I think I'll start with this middle one. So I'm just going to do, I think, a chain stitch running around the edge of it, and this obviously helps to hold the applique piece in place, but it also just adds a little bit of a decorative touch. So I'm going to turn a corner here, and I'm going to start my stitch in the same place, but this time I'm going to just pull it out at a right angle, and it just turns the corner quite nicely. So to start a new thread, I've just come up where the next stitch would naturally have started, and I'll just carry on as though nothing happened, and you won't be able to see the join there. And I'm going to finish just inside that very first chain stitch so it looks fairly seamless, and just finish off my thread there. Okay, so that's my first one with my chain stitch border. So I'm going to get this sort of gold yellow that I've got. I'm going to use this on the posts. I'm going to do a fly stitch down them, and again, if you need a refresher, details are in our March stitch guide, and I'll put a link in the top corner there so that you can get to that easily. Right, so I'm going to pick out this orangey yellow here in this fabric, and I'm going to do some blanket stitch around this one. So I'm going to start in the middle of an edge because it's going to give me the better finish if I do that, and I'm going to keep my stitches quite small, and I've got a little bit of an angle here, so I'm just going to stitch into that angle. So you'll see my stitches are going to sort of point towards each other a little bit on that inside edge. And at the top I'm going to do my trick where my stitches all sort of start at the same point, and it will just give me a really nice sharp corner at the top there. Off back where we started. We've got a blanket stitch, birdhouse, and maybe this one could have some feather stitch over the top. So I'm going to go with this nice sort of warm yellow. I've got my 2 strands again, and I think maybe I'll start in the middle and work to the right. So rather than rocking backwards and forwards, I'm going to sort of follow the line of the roof, and then I'm going to come back the other way. So I'm just going to work upside down. Just turned it round so that I can see the line a little bit easier. And I'm going to finish my thread there, and then I'm going to go back to the top, and I'm going to work upside down again so that I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to start just inside that first stitch again, this time work my way to the left of the birdhouse roof, and I'm going to work my way back down the side and just finish off my thread there. Now the birds are going to need to be able to get into these birdhouses, so there's a couple of options that you could use. You could put little buttons in as the ways in. You could use beads, but I think I'm going to do some buttonhole wheels to create the little holes for the birds to go in. So I've got a little bit of dark grey here, and again I'm using 2 strands. Okay, so I've drawn in some little circles just to help me, and I'm going to work my way around, just keeping my stitches really close together. So remember, we're always going back into the centre and coming up on the outside edge of our circle. There we go, so that's our little hole for the birds to come in. I'm going to put the other 2 in, and then we'll come back and add in our lettering. Okay, so I have put in my blanket stitch wheels to make windows for the birds to go in, and this one I wasn't quite happy with the edging. It didn't look like it matched these 2, so I've just added some whipped back stitch just around the outside edge of my birdhouse. So what I'm going to do now is add in my lettering, and I've printed out just on normal paper my lettering so that it fits inside the space at the top there. And I'm going to use some of this soluble webbing, stick-on soluble webbing that I've got here, and I'm going to just do a little bit of magic and turn on a light box, and you should be able to see now the lettering through there, and I'm just going to trace the lettering onto the webbing. Okay, so if I take away my light box, you can see I've traced my lettering onto that sticker there, and I'm just going to cut out my sticker, and it's got it's just like a sticker, so it's got a backing. So I'll bring my panel back in, and I'm going to just peel the sticker off the backing, and I'm going to position my sticker just centrally in that space at the top. So now I've got my lines to stitch over. Okay, so I have put in my lettering. I'm hoping it's going to stand out enough, and I just wanted to show you what to do with this stick-on stabiliser. So if I bring in my bowl of water, this is cold water, you don't have to use hot, and if I just dunk in my piece of stitching there, and I'm not going to do anything to it, I'm just going to leave it there for a minute, and gradually you should be able to see that stick-on stabiliser starting to dissolve. Now if I go in and just move it around, it works quicker if your water's warm, but you don't have to have warm water. So you can see it's starting to break away there now, and I'm only going to work very gently because I don't want to mess up my stitching, but I'm just going to agitate the surface there just with the flat of my thumb and use my nail to just get into any tight spaces, and I'm just going to allow that to dissolve in the water. You could leave it to soak for a little while, it won't hurt it. And if you're using Kunin felt, the stuff that we sell, you can actually machine wash that up to 30 degrees, so it's really sort of robust felt. So that has dissolved away, and I'm just checking in the little spaces. So it's not instant, it doesn't take long. Okay, so I'm just going to let that drain, and I've got a towel here that I use for all my embroidery projects because it's pretty good practice to just rinse off your embroidery when you finished it, because the oils from your hands can damage it over time. And I'm just going to blot that just to get some of the water out. Because I'm using a towel, my stitches aren't going to get crushed because the pile of the towel is going to absorb the stitches and move. So they don't get too flat. So I think that stands out enough. So I'm just going to leave this to dry, and then we'll come back and add the last few finishing touches. So if I bring that up to the camera, you should be able to see that I've got, it's quite subtle, but there's more contrast in real life than on camera. So I've got my lettering in there, and it looks actually very neat because you might not be able to pick it up because I've sewn over the stabiliser. I've got really neat lettering there now. So I thought it might be nice just to use our fly stitch that we've learnt to add a couple of little birds in the background, and we're going to do this in a similar way to the birds prompt that we used a couple of weeks ago, but this time I have got fly stitch at our disposal, so it makes really great birds. So I'm just going to do some tiny detached fly stitches. Just in that little space there. Maybe a third one, just a really, really small one. So that bird's going to be very far away. Just to add something into that space there. So here's our finished piece. It's a really simple one this week. Just playing around with a bit of applique and our new stitches for March, fly stitch and feather stitch, chain stitch, blanket stitch, and going back to a bit of whipped back stitch for the lettering. We've got our detached fly stitches here. Oh, and our buttonhole wheels as well for the little holes for the birds to go into the bird houses. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Looking forward to seeing what you come up with our prompt of nesting. And if you share your work on Facebook or Instagram and use hashtag FSHwingingit and hashtag FSHwingingit11, we will be able to see each other's work and just celebrate each other's creativity. So I will see you in the next video. Happy crafting. I'll see you soon. Bye.